Talking at the school bus stop, yeah. What else?
Bringing in your trash can.
Bringing in their trash cans, praise God for the people like that. What else?
Mowing lawns.
What was that? S'mores night. I like it. What was the one back there?
Mowing lawns.
Mowing the lawns. It's great. Well, thank you. These are just some of the many ways that we can get to know our neighbors. Now, I think many of you know that Garrett and I realized first service when I did this that when I take off my heels, I lose a couple of inches. So bear with me if I stand on my tiptoes. Many of you might know that Garrett and I bought a house when we moved here to be with you at Linworth United Methodist Church. It's the first time that we've bought a house. I was a little surprised at how much I mourned leaving our neighborhood. So you wouldn't think that moving just from Westerville to Worthington would uproot a person so much, but it's doing some odd things in my own spirit. Our house in Westerville was the parsonage of the church that I was serving then, and it was nestled on a beautiful street in which the neighbors were what I like to call front porch people. Do any of you live in front porch people neighborhoods? See, there's not a whole lot, but they do still exist. We knew all of our neighbors by name, and we loved to say hello to them as we strolled up and down the street in the waning evening hours, mostly the bedtime stalling. If you have kids, you know the bedtime stalling game. We walked up and down that street so many times. The struggle, though, was that when we first moved there, we very quickly realized that we were the only people in our 30s on that street. The reality is that the homes on that street were probably above the price point of your average 30-year-old. And while we were thankful to live in a beautiful, historic, and church-owned home, we found ourselves a bit isolated. Never intentionally, but when our neighbors were out on their front porches sharing a glass of wine, we were starting the bedtime routine. And while they were having dinner parties, we were cleaning up avocado off of the floor, the wall, the ceiling, and everywhere else that avocado can be. It took us almost 3 years of the 4 that we lived there to find our place in the neighborhood. I knew we were at home in our neighborhood when one day our daughter toddled out of the house and down the street to look at the fuzzy lamb's ear plant that our neighbor 2 houses over had in her flower beds. I didn't even know she was gone until I was walking down the stairs after drying my hair and I heard a knock on the door. It was our next door neighbor, Gwen, returning our daughter to us. Instead of shame, however, I felt gratitude because I knew that that was our neighborhood. So when we closed on our house, we were anxious because the house across the street from us was also listed for sale. We knew that in buying a house, we were hoping to settle down after, I kid you not, living in 4 houses in 10 years. Moving is exhausting, and it's one of the most glamorous parts of being a United Methodist pastor, I promise you. But we thought to ourselves, what if the people who bought the house across the street turned out to be awful? What if they blew their leaves into our driveway? That's Garrett's concern, not mine, because I don't do the leaf management. What if they played basketball at 6 a.m.? That's the thing. What if they voted for the candidate opposite us? It's a valid concern, right? Although we live on a dead end, so campaign signs tend to be wasted in our part of the neighborhood. But the day we signed the paperwork on our house, we drove over to the house, our house. We opened the door with our keys, and we stood in the kitchen wondering what in the heck we were getting ourselves into, and at that moment the doorbell rang. It was our next door neighbor who wanted to introduce himself to us. This is the same man that a week later texted us knowing that we hadn't moved in yet. He just wanted to make sure that we didn't have any food in the refrigerator because we had lost power and the food would spoil. He's a wonderful guy. He's the same guy who, after we had been at the house painting, saw that the wind had blown open the back door that we neglected to lock, and so he locked the door and pulled it shut for us. Just 2 short weeks after our moving trucks pulled away, leaving us residents of Worthington, a moving truck pulled into the house across the street, and suddenly we turned into those neighbors. You know, those neighbors, they've got their watch on everything. But as I was heading over to church, I backed down the driveway and I saw the new homeowner standing outside. I introduced myself to and I heard what I first thought was a terrifying shriek. But I learned that it was the sound of a squeal of affection from the kiddo across the street, who's about the same age as Graham. They immediately hugged each other, having never met before. And they are fast friends, and to this day, this is how they greet each other when either of them returns home. Even though we're trying to instill in these girls that you have to talk to a grown-up before you cross the street. I'm so thankful that we live on a humble little street. There are only 8 houses where we are building a sense of neighborhood. But I know that for many people, that's not the norm anymore. It seems that for many, gone are the days of walking next door and knocking because you need to borrow some oil for your cake or because you just wanted to check in on each other. I find it interesting because in talking with many folks here at Linworth about the reason they stayed at Linworth after they first visited, many people cited that the reason they stayed is because a pastor randomly stopped by to visit. Are any of you in that camp? I haven't been in this service. There are a few. Okay, more in the first service. Research states now that for many Americans, though, that would be the surefire way to make sure they never came back to church. Like, what would you do, honestly, if somebody knocked on your door and you opened it and it was your pastor? You can be honest. I won't be offended. In 1968, making its U.S. national debut, Mr. Rogers first asked us the question, "Won't you be my neighbor?" For the next few weeks, we're going to look at the world as Fred Rogers saw it and hoped to see it. For many across generations, Mr. Rogers was the face of childhood. From 1968 to 2001, being only unthroned by Sesame Street, young viewers and their families watched the longest-running children's program. They tuned in to watch Mr. Rogers change his shoes, slip on his cardigan, and feed the fish. Do you know that he only started feeding the fish after a little viewer wrote in and worried that the fish was starving? That's why he did it. She was terrified that the fish was going to die, so he fed the fish. Even today, as stories unfold about the sordid underbellies of our childhood heroes, I've heard so many people say, "Please don't let Mr. Rogers have some sort of skeleton stashed away in his closet." And for all that any of us know, that's not the case. Fred Rogers was an ordained Presbyterian minister, a devoted husband, and he believed in speaking honestly and gently. He was kind and he was dedicated. He cared deeply, but he never shied away from the tough subject. In fact, for many parents, when something awful happened in the world, it was Mr. Rogers who led by example on how to talk to your children. He was the sort of neighbor that not only I hope to have, but the sort of neighbor I hope to be. Now, the word neighbor has emerged within our worship service already this morning, and in the Hebrew Bible, it comes up first in the book of Exodus. And when it's used then, it's talking about your people. The concern was about relationship. Don't take the stuff of your people, because that's not nice. Even into the time of Jesus, the Jewish understanding of a neighbor was another faithful Jew. A neighbor was a person like you. Anyone who was not like you was the enemy. And so Jesus, like he often does, quotes the law and counts our enemies as those who we are called to love. Jesus is saying, those people who don't look or sound or eat like you, yeah, love them too. And while I do think it's an appropriate interpretation of Jesus' call to love your enemy in understanding that the people we want to vilify are those that we are called to demonstrate love toward, I also think that at the most simple level, Jesus is saying that we are called to love any person, whether they look like me, agree with me, live in the same zip code as me, vote the same way as me, or clean up their yard the same way I do. In fact, nestled around the parable of the Good Samaritan, someone poses the question to Jesus, who is my neighbor? And as it happens, a neighbor is both someone in need and someone who responds. After Paul was converted, he sought to spread the gospel to both Jews and non-Jews. He spoke and wrote at length about how his own faith would impact other people. And we hear about that in today's reading from Romans, Having experienced God's grace, he wanted to share that grace with others. Each of us must please our neighbor for the good purpose of building up that neighbor. May the God of steadfastness and encouragement grant that you live in harmony with one another. Or, as the Message paraphrase summarizes Paul's words, strength is for service, not status. Each of us needs to look after the good of the people around us, asking ourselves, how can I help? Strength is for service, not status. I saw this sort of neighborly love reaching out as I drove down 71 a few weeks ago. As I approached an overpass, my stomach sank at seeing a banner hanging. Because, sometimes on 71, those banners with graphic images that one group in particular displays at the same location. I feared for what I would see as I drove closer, but much to my spirit's surprise, as I drove closer, I read the words, "You are worthy." I thought to myself, oh yeah, I am. And then I was reminded that everybody else driving was getting the same message. That was it, black letters on a white sheet. You are worthy. Shortly after, the sign maker was featured in local publications. Her name is Cecily King, and her children and some of their friends have taken on this task of restoring kindness. She was quoted in saying, "Sometimes it's sad to me that it's not normal for someone to be nice to you." It's not normal that somebody is nice to you. She says it should be normal. Another one of her projects was in the short north. She set up a compliment booth. And if you're like me, sometimes it's hard to receive a compliment. But you could step up to her booth and she would just say, "Your haircut is rad." Or, "That is the best shirt I've seen today." And she reflected on how odd it was to watch people react because that's not the default for us. Through our last month's stewardship campaign, we talked about the economics of neighborly love, but now we're just talking about being a neighbor. I love the visual of the